Everyone, and on behalf of the FHWA Office of Safety and our safety program, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar for our 2021 update to the focused approach to safety. My name is Jeff Shaw, and I am an intersections safety program manager with our Office of Safety. I would like to real quickly go through today's agenda and then hand it over to Mike Griffith for a few introductory comments. So the flow of today's webinar will be that Mike will welcome everyone and give us a little bit of background about the focused approach and what it means to our safety program. Then he'll turn it back over to me, and I'll provide more background about the initiative, as well as describing the process that we've gone through to get us to this point of the 2021 update and rollout. After I walk through the process that we went through and describe our efforts to this point, Tori Brinkley from our Resource Center will share the results of the update process, and she will walk through the new focus states and discuss what comes next. And then following Tori's part of the presentation, we'll hear from some special guest speakers from Tennessee and New York, who will talk about their activities and accomplishments from being a focus state in the past. So they've got some very encouraging experiences, I think, to share with everyone. And it's a good way to kind of kick off this new cycle of the focused approach. Then after hearing about the experience from Tennessee and New York, we'll use the remaining time for Q&A. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Mike Griffith. Mike is our Director of the Office of Safety Technologies. And Mike, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to share with you our new focused approach to safety. It goes back in time. We actually started it in 2004. And every few years we've updated it. And the last update was done in 2015. A lot has changed over the past 6 years, and we obviously recognize the need to do an update. And one element that I'm really proud of is the analysis that we did this round. I think each round we're getting more sophisticated in our analysis of the data and our selection criteria in terms of choosing which states that should be part of the focused approach to safety, where we see some great opportunities to work with the states to make a difference in reducing fatalities and serious injuries on the nation's highways. Our executive director, Tom Everett, when he looks at our safety programs, he sees all the great work we're doing, and we're stretched pretty wide in terms of all the different efforts we have in our safety office. And his main advice to us over the years has been to sharpen our focus. And the focused approach to safety is all about that. I mean, focus is obviously right in the title. And so we're very strategic about this initiative. And we're very excited to work with states and local agencies to advance this initiative. And we really want to make sure everyone has a good understanding of what the focused approach to safety is if you've not been involved in the past, and really ask those questions at the end to make sure you have a clear understanding. And we welcome, all questions. So please engage when we get to that point. Ultimately, a focused approach is prioritizing our resources. We are going to give priority on technical assistance and training to the focus states, but we also obviously welcome opportunities to help other states that are not part of the focused approach to safety, and I believe Jeff is going to touch on that. In terms of some of the success that we've had over the years, I could speak for an hour actually on a number of success stories that have been achieved through the focused approach to safety. And when I think of the pedestrian and bicyclist program and what we've done through the focused approach, we've had some wonderful peer exchanges. I've seen agencies take the pedestrian safety action plans that we help them develop and really put them into action. There was a peer exchange that was done in Austin a couple years ago where we had 11 focus cities, and they had an excellent exchange on different ideas for programs that they should be advancing to address pedestrian and bicyclist safety. Intersections, and Jeff has been one of our agency leaders when it comes to advancing intersection safety. I look at all the great work that we've done in advancing innovative intersection designs, and the focused approach to safety has certainly helped facilitate that. I also look at the work we've done to help states develop intersection control evaluation policies, and that's really taken off over the past several years, and the focused approach to safety was instrumental in making that happen. And then with Roadway Departure, I think of our recent work through Everyday Counts in terms of reducing roadway departure crashes, and we've had a really nice syncing between the Everyday Counts initiative with Roadway Departure and the focused approach to safety. And so we're really looking forward to working with the states that'll be part of the focused approach to safety. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff and really dig into some of the details here.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate you getting us started off on a positive note there. As Mike said, you know, the focused approach has been an initiative of our program for quite a long time, and we use it for multiple purposes, both for our own internal strategic planning purposes as well as how we allocate our assistance and training to the states and local agencies. So it's a really important component of our program, and I think we're quite proud of the things that we've all accomplished together through it over the years. So our starting point for updating the focused approach is very familiar. We have our program areas of roadway departure, intersections, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And cumulatively, these areas represent nearly 90% of traffic fatalities in the United States. Now, with all of the changes and all the tweaks to the focused approach over the last 17 years, these have been among the focus areas from the very beginning and throughout all of the updates. So again, we feel like, you know, where we're at today is a pretty good place. We know that these categories, these safety categories, are categories that resonate with our state and local partners. And so, you know, the starting line means that basically at this point, we don't have to make wholesale changes to the initiative, but we do want to look for opportunities. So another thing to keep in mind is that, as Mike had said, you know, the focused approach has evolved over the years, and it's important to point that out. So with each iteration of the focused approach, it's not just about a change on the list of which states or local agencies are associated with the different focus areas. It's also opportunities, as Mike had said, to update our data modeling, use more sophisticated approaches. When the focused approach first began many years ago, it was basically a frequency and rate basis, you know, total fatalities and then a rate of fatalities based on vehicle miles traveled. That has obviously gotten better over the years, and we're pretty excited about this opportunity and how we went about that modeling. We also take into consideration qualitative feedback that we get from our internal and external stakeholders over the years. So as we work with focus states and with local agencies, and we hear back, you know, how is the focus approach working and what are we accomplishing, we certainly feed that back into our update cycle. We also canvass our internal safety specialists across the country and get feedback from folks on the front lines in the focus states and folks who are not in focus states. There have been many occasions in the past where states have said, hey, are you sure that we shouldn't be a focus state, or our state is interested in this, can we be a focus state? And so we try to take that kind of account, we try to take that kind of information into account as well. And then at any given time, there may also be departmental, US DOT, or agency, Federal Highway Administration, priorities and initiatives that we want to try to dovetail into a focused approach update. An example of that would be in the past where we had been doing focus cities. That was a dovetail with a secretarial initiative back when Anthony Fox was the Secretary of Transportation. And so we look at those inputs as well and decide, okay, how can we make the focused approach integrate with other priorities? So in the end, it's important to realize that while the initiative itself is pretty consistent over time, there are some distinct differences from one iteration to another. So an analogy that I came up with is like triangles. They share some similarities, but they're not identical. And so, you know, what we don't want is to necessarily compare past iterations of who was or wasn't a focus state to where we're going next. So the kind of feedback and guidance we got leading into this update effort actually started internally back in 2019. So we've been at this for some time now. Early on during that update effort, we solicited and received feedback from our field staff, as I mentioned. We also got feedback from our program managers and subject matter experts within the safety discipline and from our leadership team, as Mike had mentioned. Based on what we heard back collectively, there were a few key takeaways that kind of set the stage for our update steps. First, it was determined that the focused approach should continue to maintain an orientation toward infrastructure-based strategies that are at the core of our highway safety improvement program. We are certainly aware of non-infrastructure safety strategies that are worthy of time and energy and funding. But we felt like, you know, this is an initiative of FHWA and of our Office of Safety, and so we wanted it to align with our signature program, which is the HSIP. Secondly, we wanted to continue to avoid a bias toward mainly large states, those states that just, you know, happen to have high fatality numbers simply because they are very large. And again, you know, looking back over time at previous iterations, when we were just using fatality frequency and rate, oftentimes we ended up with a majority of states that were simply larger states. That didn't necessarily indicate overrepresentation or opportunity. So we've tried to refine our analysis over time. Third, as Mike had mentioned, we got direction to really sharpen the focus and look for more pronounced overrepresentation. And as a corollary to that, you know, if it reduced the total number of focus states, that would not necessarily be a bad thing. In fact, we look at that as being advantageous in terms of being able to provide resources and make sure that we have enough to go around. And finally, we wanted to use a similar analytical approach across all the focus areas. So in the past, we've used different analytical approaches for different focus areas because maybe the means of exposure didn't quite line up, or there were different reasons that we had to kind of do something different for one focus area versus another. So we wanted to use this as an opportunity for consistency across how we modeled and identified. So with those takeaways serving as the framework for our update, these were the specific steps that we took. First, we wanted to be open to considering different or new focus areas. So we start by reassessing the focus areas. To inform this step, extensive crash tree diagramming was done and studied so that we could explore different data-driven possibilities for focus areas. So we looked at crash factors, circumstances, harmful events, etc. Really kind of looking through all the different fields available to us within the FARS data and decide where the opportunities looked to be. At the same time, we also decided that we could mine the SHSP database and examine what additional possible focus areas appeared frequently in state strategic highway safety plans. So in other words, what are the data-driven priorities that our states are saying they have? So these were the two primary inputs to helping us determine what the focus areas should be. Once we had the focus areas, then we moved into the statistical modeling, and I'll talk in detail about that, but we looked at the modeling in two ways. One, using a travel exposure, extent of travel, and then the other looking at population. Third, we added an equity overlay by using the race and ethnicity information that's available and common to both the FARS data and data from the US Census. So as many of you are probably aware, there have been a lot more examinations of matters concerning equity in the road safety realm. A benchmark report by the GHSA earlier this year came out. And so we know that states are also looking at this issue. So we felt like this was the right time to incorporate an equity overlay into our focused approach considerations. With the modeling work then completed, we were able to come up with some different criteria and thresholds to go through some scenarios of which states should be focus states within each of the focus area categories. Now for the crash tree diagramming, and for all of the analysis, we used 6 years of FARS data. So 2014 through 2019 was the data set that we were building this update on. For crash tree diagramming, this involved, unfortunately, over 200,000 fatal crashes and fatalities. So quite an extensive data set, really one that kind of irons out all of the ebbs and flows that we tend to see year over year in safety data. So that was kind of the foundation of our focus area review. Some of the notable findings out of that diagramming effort, some of these not surprising, reinforcing what we already knew, and others I think intriguing enough that it influenced how we decided to go forward. So first, 50% of all traffic fatalities are related to roadway departure. Now of those, a majority, 61%, occur on rural roads, and the majority of those are occurring on 2-lane undivided roads with posted speed limits of 50 miles per hour or higher. So there's a specific context associated with roadway departure that we think is important. Next, 27% of all traffic fatalities are related to intersections, with pedestrians and bicyclists accounting for 22% of those. So significant overlap between intersections, pedestrians, and bicyclists. 16% of all traffic fatalities are pedestrians, and 3% of all traffic fatalities are bicyclists, with majorities of both of those occurring in non-daylight conditions. And then about half of intersection fatalities and majorities of pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities are occurring along roads with posted speed limits of 40 miles per hour and higher. So a couple of the takeaways here is that we're seeing a context that's standing out for roadway departure, and we're seeing speed as an underlying circumstance across all of our focus areas. The findings from the database mining effort, what we found here, again, not terribly surprising, but it again served to reinforce that we're probably in a pretty good place with the focused approach focus areas. So consistent majorities of states have identified intersections, roadway departure, pedestrians, and bicyclists as among their top SHSP emphasis areas. We also see speeding among those top emphasis areas. And then we try to take an extra step here, and in consideration of our safety performance management directive, which considers both fatalities and serious injuries, and looking at trying to reduce both of those, as well as fatalities and serious injuries concerning non-motorized users, we were trying to consider what's the ratio between fatalities and serious injuries. So where the data was readily available from state strategic highway safety plans, we combined all that information and came up with some rough ratios. And what that told us is that within these focus areas, there are also a very large number of corresponding serious injuries. In other words, by focusing in these categories, we think we can reduce both fatalities and serious injuries. So this was an important finding for our efforts here. So with all that considered, our focus area recommendations are the following. We propose to continue the existing focus areas of roadway departure, intersections, pedestrians, and bicycles, but to treat pedestrians and bicycles separately. So previously they had been combined into kind of a non-motorized user category. But with this update, we are modeling and treating them separately. Instead of adding more focus areas, we decided to go with what we are calling emphasis areas to be integrated within those 4 main focus areas. These emphasis areas are speed management and 2-lane rural roads. And again, that was something that we saw coming out of the crash diagramming exercise that really stood out. So speed management will be an emphasis area for all focus areas, and 2-lane rural roads will be an additional emphasis area for roadway departure. And so within each of the focus areas, what we want to do is highlight the strategies that are cross-cutting to the particular focus area and speed management, or in the case of roadway departure, 2-lane rural roads. So basically we're looking at really lasering in on the strategies and countermeasures that speak to those emphasis areas within the focus areas. Finally, the last major change that we decided to go with was shifting away from identifying specific focus cities, as was done with the previous update in 2015, and instead look to do comparable modeling at the regional or MPO level. And the reason for this is that past experiences suggested that the safety challenges that we could identify at the city level really tended to be more regional in nature. And so we decided to expand that and instead identify overrepresented regions or MPOs, which then would obviously potentially include many cities that are constituents of those regions or MPO boundaries. We also decided to expand this local level component to be intersections as well as pedestrians and bicyclists, because we did see that considerable overlap in that crash diagramming exercise. We did not do this for roadway departure because it is a much more rural oriented safety challenge. And we also decided that it would be a better fit to have that 2-lane rural roads emphasis area. So with the focus areas confirmed, then we proceeded to conduct the modeling and analysis. This involved developing safety performance functions, the models for each of the focus areas relating fatalities to 2 different measures of exposure, travel extent and population. For population, we used data from the US Census, and for travel extent, it varied depending on the focus area. For roadway departure and intersections, we used the VMT data from the FHWA Highway Statistics series. For pedestrians and bicyclists, we actually used a miles walked or miles biked measure based on output from the scalable risk assessment method for pedestrians and bicycles, which was published in 2018. It's also known as SCRAM, is the shorthand. The SCRAM uses commute and trip characteristics from the National Household Travel Survey and the American Community Survey data set to estimate miles walked and miles biked at different geographic scales. So in this case, we were able to do this for statewide and allow, state to state estimates. as well as at the regional and MPO level. Okay, so it really was a great way where we could do more than just a population-based assessment for pedestrians and bicyclists. Then we developed we considered different options and developed an approach for an equity overlay that I'll talk more about. And then finally, with the models and metrics determined, we were able to develop screening criteria and ultimately select the focus states based on that criteria. So for those of you who are familiar with the safety performance functions like those used in the Highway Safety Manual, this should look familiar to you. So for each of the focus areas, we developed 2 models. These are negative binomial regression models, and we ended up with over 300 data points for each model. So we basically had 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. We had the 6 years of data. So we were able to develop SPFs for all the focus areas, one using travel extent or miles traveled and one using population. This approach allowed us to meet one of our requirements, which was to use similar modeling across all the focus areas. Using the SPFs allowed us to compare expected values to the observed values for each state. And so the differences between expected and observed allowed us to calculate a delta, so the difference, and a ratio, so the magnitude of the under or over representation. And I'll explain these further and walk through some simple examples. This same modeling and analysis approach was then used for the regional and MPO levels as well, and it was for the intersections, pedestrian, and bicycle focus areas. The equity overlay, what we did here was we specifically wanted to identify disparities in fatality outcomes based on race and ethnicity. So where people of color are disproportionately represented in the data. To determine the right groupings of different races and ethnicities that made up the people of color grouping, we relied on language in the executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. This was one of the executive orders that the president signed upon taking office. So we used, again, the race and ethnicity information that's common to both census data and FARS data. And using that information, we were able to calculate proportions for overall population and then proportions within that focus area fatality data set. So we had the 2 proportions, and then we were also able to take those 2 numbers and calculate a ratio. And we were able to calculate this information for all 50 states as well as DC and Puerto Rico. So those were the pieces, the building blocks of the equity overlay. Ultimately, the metrics that came out of the modeling work were the 3 following. We have the fatalities delta metric. This is the net difference between the observed average fatalities and the predicted fatalities for each focus area and for each model. We have the fatalities ratio metric, which is the ratio of the observed to the predicted. And again, that's to give us a sense of magnitude. And then the fatalities equity metric, which involves either the straight proportion of fatalities involving people of color or the ratio of the fatalities to the proportion of fatalities to the proportion of the population. And that was an or metric. So we were looking at both of those to determine whether the equity aspect was a concern in a particular state. As thresholds, so again, this is where we have the screening. Okay, so we have to draw a line, so to speak, somewhere to determine which states are above a line and which states are below a line. And again, remember from my introduction when I said we really wanted to sharpen up the focus and really look for the most overrepresented. So the thresholds that we established here were the following. First, for the fatalities delta, and again, this is the difference, the number of fatalities different between the observed and expected. The threshold is equal to or greater than 20 fatalities. So a state had to have 20 excess fatalities or more for a particular focus area for both the miles traveled as well as the population. So it was pretty consistent that it was over what the model would predict. Second, for the fatalities ratio, the magnitude that we set this threshold for is 1.1, or basically at least 10% higher than average. So what we're trying to do is avoid scenarios where a state was maybe just over that ratio of 1, and maybe with one more year of data, maybe it would fall under, or vice versa. So we're really trying to get to the point where consistently overrepresented. And then finally, the fatalities equity threshold. And this was either the proportion of people of color fatalities was greater than the national median value, or the ratio of the proportion of people of color fatalities to the proportion of people of color population is greater than 1. So if either of those were true, then it would check the box for the equity criteria. So just to walk through some very quick and simple examples of this. So for a fatalities delta scenario, it can be positive or negative. So a state could be experiencing more fatalities than the model predicts, or fewer. Given the following, if the observed average fatalities for a focus area was 100, but the predicted fatalities from the regression model is 75, then the fatalities delta would be 25. So 100 minus 75, 25 more fatalities than would be expected for that particular exposure basis. So again, that would be either the miles traveled or the population. So our threshold again was 20. So in this case, in this scenario, 25 greater than 20, it would check the box. For the fatalities ratio example, let's use the same two numbers. So observed fatalities 100, predicted fatalities 75. That ratio then would be 100 divided by 75, and that would equate to 1.33, or 33% higher than would be expected for that model. So again, 1.33 higher than 1.1, that would check the box for the ratio criteria. And then for the fatalities equity, what we've got here is two important inputs. We've got the proportion of the census population for people of color is 20%. We've got 100 fatalities for this particular focus area, all races and ethnicities, and we've got 25 fatalities involving people of color for that focus area. So the proportion of the fatalities would be 25 out of 100, or 25% concerned people of color. The ratio then would be the proportion of the fatalities divided by the proportion of the population, so 25% divided by 20%, or a 1.25 ratio. So in this case, the ratio is clearly higher than 1, so this would check the box for the fatalities equity. Now, if 25%, if the straight proportion of people of color fatalities, if that 25% happened to be higher than the national median value, then that would have also checked the box for this particular threshold. So the last thing I want to mention before I turn it over to Tori to walk us through the results and what comes next is just to quickly talk about what happened with the regional and MPO identification. So again, we felt like the experience with the last iteration having focus cities, there were a lot of positives that came out of that. And we're going to hear some examples of that from our state guests later today. So we wanted to maintain a local component to the focused approach. But as I said earlier, we thought it would be better to look at this from the regional and MPO level, because these are challenges that tend to be shared in those areas. So it's important to understand we did similar modeling and analysis at the regional and MPO level. So what's going on here is we've got a focus state identified and then potentially also regions or MPOs identified as overrepresented in that state as well. So the idea here is this should genuinely be a shared challenge that the state and the locals have. We're hoping to avoid scenarios where there may be differing priorities or opinions concerning a particular safety challenge. We also hope that by starting at the regional and MPO level, it'll actually help make better connections at the local level, in the towns and cities and counties. Because we think as regional entities used to kind of being the go-between between a state and the locals, MPOs are a great partner in this effort. And so we think they'll be a great conduit to helping advance safety priorities at those local levels. And as we'll hear later, in the case of New York, one of our special guests, Sandy Misewitz, is also going to talk about the partnership that they had within their MPO in the state of New York. So just stay tuned for that. I think we'll hear some great experiences there. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tori Brinkley. Tori is one of our senior safety engineers from the Resource Center Technical Services team on safety and design. Tori, I am giving you control.
Thank you, Jeff. I did try answering some questions that have popped up in the chat. So while I'm going through the next slides, hopefully Jeff can go back and correct or address anything that I didn't touch upon. So I'm Tori Brinkley. I'm a senior safety engineer with the Federal Highway Administration's Resource Center. Have been working closely with Jeff on this and others, and might have to ask his help with advancing the slides since Teams is quirky for me. There it is. Thank you. So I'm going to go through where, after we've gone through all of that analysis, determining the metrics to use, their criteria, as well as both Mike and Jeff had mentioned, there was a lot of discussion on this. Oops, and let me go back. It's way too far ahead, Jeff.
I think your control caught up all at once.
I only clicked it once. We love Teams, don't we? So this is where we're at. I'm going to give you some maps that you'll see a little later on. I believe Jeff also uploaded into the file share. Hopefully you can access that, the PDF of this presentation. But under the 2015 focused approach, we had 25 unique states. So that's about half of the states that we have. There were 3 focus areas, predominantly roadway departure, intersections, and then ped bike was a combination. There were no emphasis areas under any of those, even though there might have been some states that would have certain emphasis areas. There were 11 roadway departure states, 9 intersection states, and the 17 ped bike states, which included cities that were underneath those. 8 of those states had 2 or more of these focus areas to work with. And at that time, there was different criteria that was used for selecting the focus states or cities, especially when you're looking at roadway departure. I think all 3 of them had just different criteria. So when we started working on this iteration for the 2021, we started looking at what could we do better, especially because things have changed over the past 6 years. There's more data out there. There's more states and local agencies that are using strategic safety action plans. There's more work going on between the local level and the state level as well. So through all of this, we ended up with 16 states and 4 focus areas, separating the ped and the bikes from each other so that there could be more focus on those individual ones. There was also the emphasis areas added in there, the speed management for all 4 of these areas, because we know speed plays a big role in roadway departure, intersection, ped, and bicycle crashes and fatalities. And for roadway departure, there's also going to be an emphasis area on the 2-lane rural roads, since that's where a lot of those fatal crashes do happen. So we ended up with the nine states with roadway departure, 6 for intersection, 9 for ped, and 2 for bicyclists. And now only 6 states have 2 or more of these focused approach areas. And as Jeff had mentioned, we use the same methodology across all of them, with needing the and conditions for the fatal delta, the and conditions for the fatal ratio, and then there's the or condition for the equity. So this is the overall comparison that you can see here. Again, 2015, there was 25 total states. You can see the underlying states that were dropped from the 21 update, or we could say maybe have graduated off due to the data that they have. And then you can also see the 2021 focus states that we have in there. The bolded states are ones that are new to the program. Some of these states, I believe probably all 4 of them, may not have even been part of a focused approach iteration in the past as well. For those that are, you'll see with Montana and Wyoming and Oklahoma, these 3 states had a high population related to Native Americans. And so with those population numbers and the deltas that came out of those, that's what met or gave them the criteria, the check mark in the equity, plus in other areas as well. I believe this morning a memo with more information was sent out to all of the federal aid offices, their division administrators, and so they will have that information, and hopefully we'll be setting up meetings to talk with the state DOTs in the coming months. When we look at just the roadway departure focus states, you can see that we've gone from 11 states total to just 9. Some of them are still the same. We have Texas that is in there, continuing on in Louisiana, some of the southeast states, but we've added in the rural states of Montana and Wyoming. With the intersection, you see a little bit of a change as well. We went from 9 states to 6. Some states are still in there. We've got Arizona still being a high intersection state along with Nevada, but we have added in Colorado with that. So, and some of the superscripts, as you see down here, when you read the footnotes, some of those states also have a qualifying region or MPO in their focus state. So there can be more assistance for those regions and MPOs as part of the focused approach initiative. And here we have what the regions and MPOs are. I know somebody did ask a question about the past cities that would have been part of an intersection or ped bike, and we certainly are going to be continuing on whatever efforts have been started with the 2015 states and agencies to bring those to some kind of completion with that, but we are also going to be starting to work with these new states and the new agencies that are part of the 2021 iteration. But in here you can see, you know, for the Maricopa, as an example, in Arizona, the Maricopa Association of Governments, that would include Phoenix. I believe Phoenix was part of the 2015 intersection, just being the city. So as a city, you can be one kind of agency, but as Jeff had pointed out, in many of those cities, there's overlapping or, you know, issues go beyond the city borders and into that region or MPO. So trying to address more of the problems that might be part of that local area, not just focusing in on the city itself. For the ped bike focus states, you can see here the changes from 18 down to 9. The 2 states that are also bike focused are California and Florida, due to the numbers that came out. Again, as we looked at the FARS data and running the iterations through there. So, and then again, the superscript, at least number 4 for these states, they would also have a qualifying region or MPO within that focus state. On the next slide, you can see here are the regions and MPOs that were part of that. You can see for California, when it's just looking at the bicyclists, the Southern California Association of Governments got a check mark for at least the number of bicyclist fatals that happen in that area. For Florida, you can see it's the greater Miami area, Orlando region, Pensacola region, and Tampa, St. Petersburg. So some of these are going to be have changed from what you might have seen under the 2015, but anything that we are doing under the focused approach will be available for others beyond the states involved in this iteration. So from the focused approach, there is the priority training and assistance that Jeff had mentioned, working on countermeasures, strategy implementation, helping to develop self-assessments, looking at data analysis, action plan development. A lot of these are the same as what has been offered in the past under the focused approach, offering training in several formats, whether it's in-person or virtual workshops, also doing peer exchanges, just a wide range of activities. And of course, any state that's on the 2021 list will become a priority for both the Office of Safety and for the Resource Center within Federal Highways. If you haven't heard anything yet already from your division office, please feel free to contact them. As a state or a local agency, you can work through your federal aid division office to access some assistance from the Resource Center. We do have an open call for service that's out there right now. You have to go through your federal aid office for that, but if you have anything that you'd like to be doing, whether it's focused approach related or it's something else, the Resource Center is here to help with that. Beyond safety, so because we do have technical expertise in a wide variety of areas. Examples from past focused approach iterations, you can see here in this table, there's just a very wide range. A lot of strategic plans and action plans, workshops. Some states have actually gone through and updated their past action plans if they're continuing into the next iteration of a focused approach. There's also been peer exchanges that could be on pedestrians generally or as some aspect of a pedestrian safety or bicyclist safety. So a lot of it comes down to what you would like to get out of the program, what others would like to get out of the program as well, and then we can build something to fit your needs and bring in experts and information from other agencies that may have had success in the past. We will be hearing from Tennessee and New York just after this, so you'll get to hear what they've been able to do in their FAS. And as I mentioned, for non-focused states, it's not that we're going to be forgetting about you. We will be providing information that we can. There's going to be, of course, guides and technical assistance and outreach that will be available in all of these areas to everybody just as they get developed. I've provided some examples here. In the past, there was a PED bike safety design guides for transit that was developed. There's also guardrail installation and maintenance training that states can request. There's seminars and workshops that are being done. So there's a wide range of topics and areas that can still be done for non-focused states. And because we want to help drive down those numbers all the way across the nation. And I think now I can turn it back over to you, Jeff, before we get into the state examples.
All right, thank you, Tori. Get my camera turned back on here. All right. So I think let me just stop sharing just for a moment because I need to bring Brandon and Rob and Sandy into the mix. So Brandon, Sandy, Rob, could you guys raise your hand real quick? I have to find you in the attendees list here. Thank you. And I think maybe we don't quite have Rob in the mix just yet, but I think he's hopefully going to be joining us before much longer. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Okay, sorry for that, everybody. When the slides went wacky earlier, my machine started chugging away at something, and it wasn't making me feel real comfortable. So I apologize. I wasn't able to catch up on the questions. I was afraid I was going to upset the presentation again. So now it's time to hear some perspectives from some past focus state participants. First, we'll hear from Brandon Darks from Tennessee DOT. Where he serves as a manager in the Project Safety Office. And then after Brandon, we'll hear from Rob Limoges, the Director of the Office of Traffic Safety and Mobility at the New York State DOT, and Sandy Mishevich from, she's the Executive Director of the Capital District Transportation Committee in Albany. So Brandon, are you with us?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Excellent.
Jeff, will you be advancing my slides?
Yeah, I can do that for you. Just let me know.
Or I can share my screen if you can allow it.
I think I can try. Let me give you control. Actually, I take that back. I don't think I can give you control at the moment. Is it okay if I just advance the slides for you?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me this evening. My name's Brandon Darks, manager of the Project Safety Office. Our office houses HSIP programs, road safety audits, and other programs to assist with safety. Next slide, please. I'm going to be discussing history of the focus approach that Tennessee took on and some of the programs that were established. 2004, Tennessee was identified as a intersection roadway departure state. But, you know, 2004, we were just getting involved in safety as a whole. At the time, our office was producing transportation planning reports. And yes, safety was a function, but this is just not something that our staff could take on at the time. And the same goes in 2008, when we became an intersection safety state. FHWA came to us with some locations, and it was discussed, and it was becoming a concern because we could see it in the data. But it wasn't until May of 2010, Tennessee established the Project Safety Office, and that's when we really took off with focusing on the roadway departures and also intersections as safety. And then in 2015, the city of Memphis became a pedestrian focused state, which will lead to the last program I'll discuss. Next slide. This right here is a graph. It is the latest FARS data showing roadway departures within Tennessee. As you can see, the trend line's going down, and I strongly believe that the programs that we've implemented since 2010 have really made an impact. And it was all based on our roadway departure action plan. Next slide, please. The roadway departure action plan was created in 2011. Our office developed HSIP criteria with the goal to address roadway departure crashes along state routes. The intent initially was to be systemic with these improvements. FHWA brought in numerous locations statewide. These were segments with the focus for us looking at the conditions of the roadway that were contributing to these single vehicle departures. We looked at hot spots and large numbers of locations to establish our criteria. What we found was that you couldn't primarily look at hot spots. So we set these up by counties, by construction districts, so they would be easier to get let to contract. We brought in some locals, looked at some of the later data that we have, because initially the FHWA's locations were older data at the time. So our staff went through, vetted the data, and brought up multiple locations that met the criteria. So from 2011 to May of 2017, we let 108 locations to contract over 11 counties. We were able to implement safety countermeasures like shown on the screen for over 520 miles, which roughly works out to about $10,000 per mile. In 2018, we no longer continued with this action plan because we have implemented statewide these countermeasures in our road safety audit program and also our statewide resurfacing programs. Next slide. So then we get to the intersections. You can see, you know, like every state, intersections usually going to be second in line for your cause of fatalities. We've put a big emphasis on our intersections with our road safety audit program, but there again, it all started with our intersection action plan. Next slide. The intersection action plan was created in 2011. Our office developed criteria, and this was to address stop controlled intersections that had a high number of crashes. We started this program systemically. Initially, there were 1,770 intersections identified by FHWA. Our data office started vetting the data, looking at what had changed in the time that the data was dated that FHWA provided. After looking at all these locations, we analyzed 1,200 locations in Tennessee, with the criteria being 6 or more crashes were eligible. 12 or more crashes were eligible to have the solar powered flashing beacons on the warning signs. So we had 2 types of countermeasures that we could look there, you know, which are laid out on the slide. But as of 2017, we had 958 intersections constructed of the 1,200, and those come at a cost of about $5,500 per intersection. So now we've implemented this program and these countermeasures into our statewide roadway safety audit program. So we continue to do these countermeasures. Next slide. The newest program is Pedestrian Roadway Safety Initiative. You can see on the graph here, you know, Tennessee's had a huge increase in pedestrian fatalities recently. I attribute this to population growth, mainly in our urban areas, and also tourism. So, you know, everybody's dealing with the distracted drivers and the distracted pedestrian. So there's a lot going on, and I know other states are experiencing what we're having here in Tennessee. Next slide. The Pedestrian Road Safety Initiative, as I mentioned, it's our newest initiative. We're just getting underway. We're utilizing the Pedestrian Safety Guide and Countermeasures provided by FHWA, and also the STEP initiative. The qualifying criteria for pedestrian is based on a TDOT prioritization tool that we've created that brings in multiple criteria dealing with safety, infrastructure, equity, and also just pedestrian demand. I don't have any results to share because this is just now getting underway. We have approximately 15 locations that are being looked at in Metro Nashville and in Memphis. Next slide. In closing, I just wanted to show a layout of what TDOT has received from FHWA as far as workshops, peer exchanges. We've had multiple state-to-state peer exchanges. The improvements along with the crash data. We're now implementing safety programs on local roads, as well as getting local road data. The state peer exchanges for intersection design, and then also with STEP, you know, which is going to be crucial with our pedestrian road safety initiative moving forward. But that's about all I got. Next slide. This is my contact information. Feel free to contact me, email or via phone. And thanks again for your time and dedication to safety.
And I'm going to turn that right around on you, Brandon, and say thank you to you and to Tennessee for being such great partners throughout all of the different iterations of the focused approach. I mean, I know that you know, Jessica Rich in our Tennessee division office and all the folks in the TDOT safety office have just been exceptional to work with. And you know, you guys have done so many great things here since your office was established. It's been really gratifying to work with you, and I think seeing the results of these systemic plans finally take root should be a good thing too. So thank you very much. I think there were a couple questions that were typed into the chat pod. I think Jessica has fielded a couple of them, but Brandon, if you want to weigh in on that, that would be great. And then after we hear from New York, we can certainly take other questions from anybody who's on the line.
Yes, and you're correct. We've had a great partnership with our office, FHWA office here in Tennessee, and Jessica's been tremendous. And I look forward to putting in new programs.
Definitely. Well, thanks again. All right. So now let's see. Do I have? I think I have Sandy. Sandy, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Jeff. I am
Hey,
here.
Sandy. And how about Rob? Rob, are you there? I think I saw him join the webinar.
I'm on, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Hey, there he is. Hey, Rob. Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon.
Hi. So I introduced you guys earlier, but if you guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves again, that would be great. And then I'll just turn it over to both of you to talk about your experience with the PSAP.
Sure. You want to go first, Sandy, or you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Limoges. I am the director of the Office of Traffic Safety and Mobility here at New York State DOT. I have a former hat that I wore a few years ago as the director of our Safety Program Management Bureau, and certainly this topic is one of great importance for us as a DOT to engage with FHWA and all of our stakeholders here on addressing these focus state topics such as pedestrians, which is what I'll be talking a little bit about in a few minutes. So.
And I am Sandy Misowitz. I'm the executive director for the Capital District Transportation Committee. We are the metropolitan planning organization for the Albany, Saratoga Springs regions here in New York State. Similarly, I had a former hat of chairing a statewide safety working group for our Mpos association. And collaborated with Rob's office, as well as our other partners, the Department of Health and the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee on the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan.
Okay, I think I'll start out talking a little bit about our experience here in New York, and I just want to say thanks to Brandon for sharing all the great work that's been done in Tennessee. It's really cool to see the progress there, and took a few good notes here. So thanks for sharing that success in Tennessee, Brandon. But a few years ago now, I guess time flies. I think it was around 2010 when New York State was identified as a focus state for pedestrians, and I think at intersections as well. But I'm going to focus a little bit about our work on the pedestrian topic here in New York. And really, we probably wouldn't have made nearly as much progress without the help and support of FHWA, especially from our division office here in New York. You know, back then, our safety engineer, Emmett McDevitt, was and continues to be a great resource, but he really encouraged us to leverage the resources that were becoming available under this initiative by FHWA. So we kind of had a core group that had been talking about pedestrian safety because this has been an emphasis area for us for some years in our strategic highway safety plan, but it really kind of came together when FHWA brought to the table some resources. And one of the significant things that they did is they helped us with a small budget, but a healthy budget that allowed us to bring a consultant in on board and help us to develop a more comprehensive plan, including all of our stakeholders, to really look at a 3E approach, if you will, for pedestrian safety. And what we did is we had core buy-in from our Department of Health, our Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, and the DOT were the primary authors. We used the data that we had to develop the strategies that are included in our plan. And from an engineering perspective, we really took advantage of developing what at the time was innovative for us, which was using a systemic approach to tackling the topic of pedestrian safety. New York State determined that we wanted to dedicate significant funds, and we have dedicated $110 million to the implementation of this plan over 5 years. I think one thing that helped us was setting specific and hard deadlines for completing the plan. It's a 5-year plan, so you can see the date on the slide here was issued in 2016, and we plan to complete it by the end of this calendar year. Some of the highlights are our systemic approach looked at doing low-cost improvements at about 4,200 sites across the state, including about 1,800 uncontrolled crossings and 2,400 signalized crossings. To date, we've got about 3,500 of those sites completed. And the types of improvements that we've been looking at are, signs and markings, RFBs, backplates and things for conspicuity at intersections, crosswalks, high visibility crosswalks. That's just the infrastructure part of it. Really, we spent a lot of time working with our partners from the Department of Health to include educational components in the program. We've had a number of really successful PSAs that we've developed and issued. We've dedicated some funding to buy airtime on the radio, on television, and a lot of social media. So people have actually seen a lot of these PSAs, and they mention it to me all the time about the number of views that we've gotten for the education outreach. The other thing that we felt was really important as part of the three-legged stool is the law enforcement training. And we've had really good participation from law enforcement agencies across the state. Part of our plan had identified focus communities. We had 20 focus communities across the state. So our Governor's Traffic Safety Committee has done a lot of legwork to reach out to the law enforcement agencies in those municipalities. They've put on dozens of training classes for helping law enforcement understand the actual laws around pedestrian safety in New York, and good practices as far as enforcing both motorist and pedestrian behavior out in the field. So that's been really important to our program, not just from enforcement, but it's also a training opportunity for everybody as those campaigns have been done in the field. And the last thing I'll mention about outreach is we do have a blitz every June, or we have had the last 5 years. We expect that to continue, where we do have a media blitz as well as an enforcement blitz for raising awareness on pedestrian safety. So the good news is it seems to be working. Many states have seen their pedestrian numbers increase as far as fatalities and injuries. I'm happy to report in New York over the 5-year period from 2016 to 2020, we had about a 21% reduction in pedestrian fatalities. Unfortunately, in 2021 doesn't look to be quite as positive of a year, but we've had some really good numbers so far. We expect that even if 21 is a bit of a rise over 2020, we hope that trend will continue back down. The slide here shows just the cover of our plan, but I would encourage folks, if you can, go to our website. There's a ton of good resources out there, this plan being one of them, as well as a number of downloadable education materials like posters and rack cards and things like that. There's some PowerPoints that we put out there for people to use with community meetings to talk about why this is important and what they can do to be safe. So it has kind of turned into a good little library of resources that we use all the time. And I guess I'll just stress to wrap it up here, the success, I think, of our program was really built on the team that we built to develop the plan and implement it, from the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee to DOH to the Mpos, to all local law enforcement partners that have gotten involved. It's been great teamwork. And I just want to give another shout out to Emmett McDevitt. I'm not sure if he's on this call or not, but he's been the champion all along and a great partner for us from division office here in New York. And you know, I'm not sure any of this would have happened without his advocacy. So thanks to Emmett. So maybe I'll turn it over to Sandy and let her talk a little bit about, you know, how the MPOs have been partnering with us on this program.
Great, thanks, Rob. So the MPOs, as I said earlier, have a statewide association here in New York, and we maintain a safety working group. All 14 MPOs are of representation on that working group, and throughout the process, the Department of Transportation has included us as part of the development team of the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan. And we were also involved in some of the implementation efforts, most notably the development of a local program for implementing some of the pedestrian infrastructure that the state was implementing on state-owned roads. We had worked with the department to develop a solicitation where approximately $40 million of Highway Safety Improvement Program funds were set aside specific to local governments, so non-state owned roadway facilities. And we helped to coordinate that effort. And it's been, you know, very well received by local government members throughout the state. We opened it to with a goal of getting 60% of that funding to the focus communities, but recognizing there were only 20 focus communities, and there's many, many more municipalities than that, obviously, here in New York. Beyond that 60%, you know, other applicants were eligible to apply, and it was definitely a very well received program. We've been continuing to collaborate with the department as this plan has been implemented, and there's an update sort of in the works, hopefully in the next year or so. And we expect to collaborate further on that as well. One of the things that the MPOs have been most successful in this partnership with is sort of serving the role of bringing this statewide information to our local government members. You know, sometimes the State Department of Transportation's have limited staffing and they can't get to every community. So having an additional group of folks through the MPOs kind of serve that role of distributing this information and working with our local partners to carry the torch forward on the recommendations of the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, I think has been very helpful and hopefully contributed to the positive experience that we're seeing here in New York. And we hope to continue that. It can be as simple as retweeting, you know, a PSA on a website or on a different piece of social media from the state. It can be as detailed as actually funding corridor studies, you know, safety assessments in a corridor, and working directly with local partners on improving pedestrian safety. So there's been a lot of ways that the MPO community has been involved in this, and I think we'll continue to do so into the future. So in the interest of time, I will stop there, but I'm sure we're welcome to answer any questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Rob and Sandy, for sharing that experience in New York. And Sandy, I think especially, I'm so happy that you were able to speak to your experience coming from the MPO level and perspective, because I think there's been a number of questions about, you know, why go away from cities, why look more at the MPOs. But I think you've touched on many important reasons why we're viewing this as an opportunity. You know, I think the MPOs are ideally suited to be that conduit, typically have expertise at the planning and programming levels that oftentimes the cities don't always have. And so I think it's just another way for us to establish, I think, more productive partnerships. So I really appreciate you weighing in on that.
Sure, no problem.
We've got a couple questions in the chat thread that I'm seeing, and thank you, Tori, for keeping up with those. I apologize again. My Teams keeps hanging every time I try to scroll through the Q&A, But yes, so we are in the Q&A portion. We've got about 10 minutes left. Tori, I know has answered a lot of questions already, which I appreciate. But if anyone would like to try to verbally answer or ask a question rather, you can try to raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Let me try stopping sharing just for a moment and see what we have. So if you'd like to ask a question verbally, please go ahead and try to raise your hand. Tori, were there any questions in the thread that you think is worth putting on the to the floor here?
Well, an easy one for you, Jeff, is somebody asked about the presentation, which I know you shared earlier. And if they're not part of the chat, you might not be able to see it. So if you could share it again, that would be great.
Yeah, let me just say yes, I'll gladly repost them to the thread here.
Yeah.
If you join later and can't find it. So just stay on for a minute or two after we conclude and give me the chance to copy it over.
And I'm scrolling back through. I know there was let's see, Rajneesh Gupta I tried to answer his question about comparison done between the 2015 cities and those who are now part of the 2021. And I think it kind of applies to some of the other areas as well, other focus areas, because of people that were on the past compared to in the future, this current cycle, and what does it mean to them? So I know there's a lot of questions about the data and the iterations that were done, and we'd probably need 2 hours to go over that because it confused me very early on. So, but Jeff knows it all. So
I do see one raised hand here. Let me see if I can get the microphone allowed. Okay, is it Harzimran? If you want to try to.
Yes, you got
Hi.
that right. Thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for the presentations. They were really interesting and useful. I have a question for Robert. So I just scanned through the document that you provided a link to, and it seems that you use the Federal Highways Systemic tool to conduct the analysis. Would you know how easy it was to use it? Did you need any special training, or was it just the consultant who did that analysis for you?
Well, we had some heavy support from the consultant. It was VHB, I'll name names. They were pretty good. We really appreciated their help. And, at that time, we were really trying to learn these skills ourselves. And it was great for us because we've been able to use that for other things like roadway departure analyses and things. But it is a bit of a different process than we're used to with our normal network screening and trying to find hotspots and really looking at, it turned into like an iterative process, right? Trying to look at different risk factors, slicing and dicing, looking at what pops out as you look at each type of thing, whether it's lane width or speed limit or functional class. It's not that hard, but it does take a little bit of a change in the way you think about an analysis. I'm a little bit far away from it now at this point, but we do have someone in my office that has a good bit of experience. If you're interested, I could connect you, and maybe you could have a conversation about how they're doing that work now.
Yes, that'll be very useful. Yep.
I put my contact information in the chat box. I'm not sure if that's visible to people or not, but we can certainly follow up afterwards with that information if you can't see it there.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that'll be very useful. That's all for me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that answer, Rob. A question for all three of you. So Brandon and Sandy too. I think we're seeing New York and Tennessee coming off of the list of focus states. I think, you know, do you guys feel like your experience has been worthwhile enough to be, you know, willing to be peers in the future, you know, participating in peer exchanges? Rob, you just offered, you know, to connect one of your staff members. I mean, do you feel like this has helped create new champions that can help others, especially looking back on where you started and where you are today?
I would for sure, I would do it again, and then I would encourage other states to do it if they had the opportunity. You're going to learn a lot. You learn what works, what doesn't work, fairly early on when you're looking at systemic projects. It's helped us tremendously with our road safety audit program, what countermeasures to consider. You know, Tennessee's a vast state with 4 regions, and the regions operate differently. You got different topography. So that's the stuff that you learn through the systemic process, to where when you're looking to implement statewide, you learn what locals are willing to allow, what, you know, your Mpos, your TPOs, what signs they want. You know, it gets down to the nuts and bolts. And now that it's an everyday program for us, we're not even discussing the little things like that, which tend to take time when you get started. So, and I would encourage any state or anybody to reach out to me. I would discuss it. We've done several state-to-state peer exchanges for systemic countermeasures, and yeah, I think it's a great program.
And Sandy, how about from the local and MPO perspective? I mean, I think it's been interesting because you were the MPO before we, you know, pivoted to this new approach with this rollout. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that I think we would absolutely do it again. I think we are doing it again on other subject matter areas. I think similarly to what Brandon just said, we learned a lot about the challenges more from a technical perspective that local governments face that maybe the state doesn't. Some of our cities have older signals, for example, and so retrofitting the hardware for pedestrian safety is a challenge that we've learned about and are trying to find ways to overcome. So there's definitely a learning curve, but I think it was well worth it. We learned a lot, and I think it will help inform the MPO funding priorities as well as that of the state as we move through future, you know, transportation improvement program updates and what have you. So I think the building of those working relationships are priceless, and I think that has really built a strong foundation on which this work can continue.
Outstanding. Yeah, I remember sitting in one of those meetings working on the PSAP and that issue of the old signal hardware coming up. I remember that discussion. That seems like an eternity ago, as Rob had kind of alluded to.
Yep.
So that's great.
Jeff, so Jeff, I think one of the things that's been really satisfying, I guess, about our program is kind of funny is everybody just says PSAP, Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, and everybody knows what you're talking about. It's become part of the culture in the department and beyond. I think is when someone says PSAP, they know what it is and they know what it means for something on the infrastructure, what it means for hopefully for educational components of it, and you know, our law enforcement partners know what it means, and I think that's been a big part of the success is just having people know what that is and have pedestrian safety on their mind during routine business. So I'll just say that. And then one other thing I think that we learned was, you know, we set some really specific goals in the plan, and kind of felt like the dog that caught the car at some point when we published the plan. And then we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get this done? And we did learn a lot about delivery, and we struggled a lot with delivery at the beginning. And then, part of the core productive years of our implementation was during COVID, and having contractors available and being able to deliver the actual construction of the jobs proved really challenging. But we've published this report with a hard deadline, so we really want to meet our deadline, and so that's been a lesson learned for us. I think we have a long after action review at the end of the year of how we can deliver this type of work more efficiently. But overall, I think it was a really good thing. So appreciate all the support.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, well, you are welcome. I mean, you guys have exceeded, I think, anybody's expectations for how far you were able to take the small amount of assistance that we were able to provide to get things started. And so this is pretty amazing. So I guess we're at that time where unfortunately we have to conclude. So let me start by saying thank you to Rob and Sandy, and thank you for sharing your New York experience. Thank you to Brandon for sharing your experience from Tennessee. It is great to hear you guys leave everybody with such a positive impression of what being a focus state or a local partner can be through the focused approach. So thanks again for that. Couple last things to say in closing. I am going to add the presentation files to the thread again, so just stay on for another minute or two and let those upload. Secondly, I want to mention that our web page for the focused approach is literally in the process of being updated as I speak, and I hope to have that completed in the next day or two. So we got hung up on one item that we needed to resolve. We were hoping to have it live by today's webinar, and unfortunately fell just a bit short. So I apologize, but that will be refreshed here before the end of the week. And then last, I want to acknowledge, very importantly, a close partner throughout this effort has been TTI. TTI was our contractor to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the modeling and analysis. Robert Wunderlich and his team down in Texas have been fantastic to work with, extremely capable and knowledgeable, and allowed us to really push the envelope on a lot of the analysis work. So I want to say thank you to them for being such great co-pilots in this effort. And I guess in closing, thank you to Tori and Mike for being with us today and presenting as well. And I guess we'll be in touch with everybody here soon who are the new focus states and focus regions and MPOs. So look for your division offices to be reaching out to you here in the coming weeks, and we'll go from there. So with that, thanks everyone. Have a great evening or a great rest of your day, and stay safe.